After talking about algae blooms for the past 6 weeks, I'm finally ready to start version 1 of this experiment. Today, I'm going to be making some concrete for the very first time. Hey, I'm Alian, and I'm once again experimenting with microalgae. If you haven't seen my past few videos, you're probably wondering, what does concrete have to do with algae blooms? And honestly, that's a pretty complex question. So I'd encourage you to pause this video and go check out some of my other videos to see exactly what I mean when I'm mixing algae blooms and concrete. But in short, I'm trying to clean up algae blooms using a substance called modified clay. And that modified clay, after it's done cleaning the algae, can be incorporated into concrete to create what would ultimately be carbon-negative concrete. So as the first version of this experiment, I'm going to try making some regular concrete with no clay added, just to see if it's possible to do this sort of thing in my basement. So let's get started. So, the first step in making concrete is to get some concrete powder. And I have plenty of that right here. I went out to a hardware store and got a big box of Quickcrete, which is essentially a powder that when you mix it with water, will form a quick drying concrete. And I've got myself a little container here. I'm going to try to make myself a little concrete brick inside this container. So I'm going to weigh out about 50 grams of Quickcrete into this container to start off. Okay, so in here, I've got about now 50 grams of Quickcrete powder. And I did some calculations, and I think I need to now add about 10 milliliters of water. So I've got my beaker over here, and I'm going to add in 10 milliliters of water using this pipette. And you can see the two are mixing together, and I'm going to now mix the concrete powder and the water together to hopefully make some concrete. Here we go. Okay, so I've mixed together all my concrete and I've kind of shaped it into this little blob in the middle of the container. And that's pretty much the first step here, just mixing together concrete and water. And now I need to let it dry. So I'm going to let this concrete sit here for, I'm going to say, the next hour or so. And I'll come back in about an hour and see what has happened to it. If all goes well, a lot of the water should have absorbed into the concrete and made it into a nice hard block. But we'll see what happens when we get there. Okay, it has been about 2.5 hours actually. I left it for a little longer than I thought I would. But, as expected, the concrete has hardened. And if I just give it a little tug out of this container, I've got my nice concrete blob here. Check it out, it's very rough on this side, but it's pretty smooth on this end, and that's because that end was touching the bottom of the container. But the point is that I was actually able to produce some real concrete right here in my basement, which is super awesome. Now, I'm super curious how strong this thing actually is, whether this can hold up any kind of weight, and I think probably the most fun way to test that would just be to throw it on the ground and see if it breaks. So I'm gonna head outside and see what happens. Okay, so I've come out here. I'm just gonna throw the concrete on the ground and see if it breaks. That's all I'm really doing here. Let's give it a go though. 3, 2, 1. Okay. It kind of broke into 2 chunks. One of them kind of stuck to the ground here. And you can see it's a lot smaller now. So there you go, concrete. So there you go. I have made concrete in my basement for the first time. This successfully completes version 1 of this algae bloom project. This is kind of the third step of the project, if the steps are create algae bloom, absorb algae with clay, and produce concrete with that clay. I've kind of established V1 of that first step. Now, I will say, this week, in addition to the concrete mix, I also got the bentonite clay that I can use to absorb algae blooms. You can see it says bentonite right on there. So next week, I'll probably be combining some of that bentonite with some of my cement mix and making that into a concrete composite. The one that I'll actually end up testing the tensile strength of when it's done absorbing algae glue. So if you want to keep following along with this experiment, make sure to follow on LinkedIn, subscribe on YouTube, and as always, I'll see you in the next one.